So there's a few things in life that are pretty locked in solid, right? Like death, taxes, EA having more loot box type things in their sports games. There's some locked in things, but one of the other locked in things you can always be confident in is that executives within gaming companies will not understand why things were poorly received and will intentionally twist things to further their own desire instead of admitting that they did something wrong. And this is another story just like that. Dragon Age the Veilguard was loved by, quote, those who played, says EA, but, quote, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience, partially because it released into a highly competitive market. It's, it's interesting enough. Basically, there was an EA like earnings call, financial call, where they went through a bunch of their stuff. And there's been some interesting revelations as part of all of this. The initial thing we got like a week ago or so was that Dragon Age the Veilguard reached 1.5, or I think they said engaged 1.5 million players. That is possibly, I mean, they didn't say sold 1.5 million copies. They said it reached and engaged 1.5 million players, which probably means they're counting returns. They're counting duplicate players on consoles. Like if I bought the game on PS5 and my wife also played it through my same copy on her user profile, that would count as 2 players, even though only 1 copy was sold. So I think they're fudging the numbers a little bit. But either way, they were expecting 3 million. 3 million would have still lost money based on how much time they spent developing this game, but it would have lost less money than if they only engaged 1.5 million players. And so without a doubt, I mean, they missed their expected target by over 50%, because again, they expected 3 million, they engaged 1.5 million, which means they sold less than 1.5 million, which means more than 50% of the target was missed, which is bad. But now they got to explain it to investors, which, is always a little bit tricky. Dragon Age Veilguard reportedly didn't meet its publisher's expectations, with sales previously said to be down nearly 50% from what EA initially hoped for, and subsequent layoffs reported across BioWare. We covered just the other day that there's reportedly less than 100 people working at BioWare now, and like literally every single person that was in the credits in a like senior writing role, all of them are gone. Like they've literally moved or fired or welcomed to retire everybody who is credited as a senior writer or like lead writer on Dragon Age the Veilguard, which props. It's not that common that you have a game that does poorly and the universal consensus is that the writing sucks. Typically, the problems with the game are more numerous or more, nuanced. They intertwine with 5 other problems. And so it's not that easy to just be like, you guys were the problem, you're gone. In this case, it really is that simple. It's like, there were a lot of things that were really impressive about Dragon Age Veilguard. It was remarkably well optimized. Graphically, it was really, really impressive. There was a lot of really cool stuff going on there. The writing was the problem. That was the big problem at the core that just rotted it to the core that you couldn't find yourself out of. And the more you played it, the more it drove you crazy. So they were able to trim all of that and respond to it very, very directly, which seems to have happened. But they went on, speaking in a recent earnings call, CEO Andrew Wilson confirms as much, explaining that the overall sales EA's published games saw this past quarter didn't hit, quote, the financial performance we wanted or expected. He goes on to name the Veilguard. Describing the company's blockbuster storytelling strategy, Wilson says that Dragon Age, quote, had, oh my God, I don't want to search for the letter D. It's the one thing about this Opera version I have, which is that it randomly searches for things when I highlight. If I tap that, drives me crazy. He says that Dragon Age, quote, had a high quality launch and was well reviewed by critics and those who played. Let me be a little pedantic. You only let a very select few people review the game. Yeah, D's in the chat. You only let a very, very carefully selected group of people review the game. And even a lot of those people hated it, okay? Because like there's some instances where you can say that maybe it's just luck of the draw that this person didn't get a review code and this person did. Maybe it's just how the cookie crumbled. For example, with Indiana Jones, I didn't do any like review coverage, preview coverage of Indiana Jones. And I was told That was because I was not on the Disney approved list. Disney had to specifically approve you as a content creator to be allowed to talk about and cover Indiana Jones. What's interesting is I was Disney approved when I went to a preview event for another Disney property, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. I didn't think the game was that amazing. Didn't give it flying marks. And then like a year later, I'm not on the Disney approved list anymore, which is funny. But anyway, I was told that's why I did not get Indiana Jones review codes or preview access or anything. It's because specifically Disney did not want me there. I kind of wear it as a badge of honor, frankly. I think that's pretty cool. Having said that, though, in that case, you could kind of say, oh, maybe it's not the game developer's fault. Like, I didn't get an Indiana Jones review code. Cool. I'm not entitled to it. They just told me you're not on the list, so we can't send it to you. Sorry. Respect it. Totally fine. Totally cool. What happened with Dragon Age: The Veilguard was different. They told all of us we were getting review codes. We set aside time and resources and money to review the game. I had Jacob ready to go to edit a review of Dragon Age: The Veilguard as the days started approaching. Then I hear little rumblings. A little birdie tells me, yeah, I'm reviewing Dragon Age: The Veilguard. You haven't gotten a code yet? No. Interesting. So I email our contact at the EA, and then I send her like a XDM. I hear back a day later or so. Oh, no, we're sending it to you. We're going to get it to you. We just, it's going to be like the day before launch. It's like, okay, so that's not a review code. Just so we're on the same page. That's not what that means. Like, just to be clear, if I cannot physically complete the game in time for the review embargo, it's not a review code. It's an early access code, but it's not a review. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. It's like, oh, well, we're just going to get it to you as soon as we can. Okay. Day before launch comes. Reviews are dropping. Nope. No review code or early access code. Email them again. Yeah, we're going to get it to you tomorrow. Worst case scenario, it comes the day after launch. And then they just ghost us. Not just me. Dozens of other streamers, YouTubers, even people that went to the preview event, and even people at the preview event who had pretty positive impressions. So at that point, you've got to pause and ask, okay, they gave it to these people. They did not give the review codes to these other people. Why? Why did those people get selected? Because it wasn't like they just filtered the list by the most subscribers, because they didn't. There were some big YouTubers that didn't get review codes. There were some big ones, of course, that did, like Skill Up. But then there were some small ones that got access to the game comparative to other people and other reviewers. So it wasn't like they did that. They weren't filtering by average views. They weren't filtering by all of that. So there was some criteria by which they gauged who to send the codes to that we were not privy to. And so they were, I mean, obviously, if they're going to be selective, they're going to send it to the people that they think they stand the best chance of impressing, and that when they're impressed, they're going to like the game the most and promote it, and they're going to get the best payoff for it. Made a bit of an oopsie because they sent it to Maddie, who hated it, and then they sent it to Skill Up, who also hated it. And Skill Up's review has done like over 2 million views and probably single-handedly prevented this game from hitting financial targets. I mean, it's honestly not that unreasonable to say if his review did 2 million views, they missed their goal by 1.5 million. If his review were glowing and those 2 million people were told, no, it's amazing, that would have moved the needle some, I think. So I think regardless, they were very selective with reviews, and we're not entitled to the review codes, to be clear. Like, I'll be fine. If anything, I think technically with our videos covering the fact we didn't get a code and EA's bizarre behavior around it, I think I got more views than if I just made a damn review. So I'm good either way. I don't need, like, for sake of business, I don't need the review code. What I have a problem with is being lied to and strung along for days upon days upon days, and then ultimately just like ghosted. I find that very unprofessional, and I've never had that happen before with any company. My manager too, he was like, I've never seen this before. He couldn't get them to respond to him, or even the people higher up in the company, he couldn't get them to respond. It was really, really bizarre. So to me, it was pretty clear that they were trying to carefully and very specifically boost the Metacritic score so that they could come back and tell their investors that they got positive reviews. Even though if they had totally opened it up to everybody, it probably would not have been that positive. But They go on. However, he admits, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. Later on during the financial call, Chief Financial Officer Stuart Canfield agrees that Veilguard underperformed. Quote, historically, Canfield describes, blockbuster storytelling has been the primary way our industry brought beloved IP to our players. This approach didn't work for Veilguard, with Canfield noting a changing market. Get ready for this. The game's financial performance highlights the evolving industry landscape and reinforces the importance of our actions to reallocate resources towards our most significant and highest potential opportunities. Translation. Dragon Age Veilguard, this type of game used to be our bread and butter. We used to be able to make millions by millions of dollars on these types of games. We're struggling to do that now, so we just need to put more effort into and money into our sports FC games, into our Madden, those core games that have significant and highest potential. That's all this means. A majority of the call was spent discussing EA Sports FC 25, but as a longtime fan of Dragon Age series myself, EA's words on the Veilguard are difficult to process, as are the recent developer layoffs. Let's see, our own Dragon Age Veilguard review dubbed the game a true return to RPG form for BioWare, with many others expressing similar sentiment, believing it was one of the best RPGs of 2024. I mean, there weren't a lot of good RPGs last year, but still, damn. I don't find it hard to square at all. I mean, there is perhaps even with that. Like, let's look at that. Perhaps even with that. So Dragon Age Veilguard right now is sitting more at like an 82. I know we could point to like user scores and be like, oh, see, this is the problem. You can't really look at user scores for any of this, especially when there's like hot button cultural issues at play with the game's discussion, because it's going to get mass downvoted. So you just can't, like, they tried to mass downvote Black Myth Wukong when it first came out. You know, there were people on like Blue Sky trying to coordinate that or whatever it was. So you just never know. I would just say, you know, don't put too much weight into that. That being said, there's a huge disparity between this sentiment and I think where a lot of other people landed. You know, I think the average consumer did not look at that as a 10 out of 10. My wife, hardcore Dragon Age fan, she was horribly disappointed by it, thoroughly disappointed by it. I mean, even some of this, these are the same companies. Eurogamer gave it a perfect score. Eurogamer Germany also gave it a perfect score. So multiple of these are just being inflated by like these big companies that have multiple branches that for some reason are given multiple spots on a Metacritic page, even though really that's not reflective of the overall sentiment. You know, perhaps the better alternative would be like OpenCritic, Dragon Age, the Veilguard here, where it's slipping into the 70s. You still get some 10 out of 10s. Dude, Joshua Duckworth played 100 hours in 3 playthroughs. How do you play that game 3 times? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. How do you play that game 3 times and not go crazy? I don't know, man. I don't get it. I think my main takeaway from all of this, though, even with the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 stuff, there is a fundamental disconnect between, I think, the average consumer that's buying these types of games and that's moving the needle on the financial performance of them, and the journalistic class or whatever in the games industry. There's just a gap. There's a gap. And sometimes, you know, journalists will review a game really poorly and everybody else loves it. And then on the flip side, there's times where they review it really positively and the average gamer just doesn't connect with it anywhere near as much. Or maybe they do buy it, but they just don't find it particularly amazing. You know, maybe like a Deathloop, where there were a bunch of companies calling that game a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And most people played it and were like, it's fine, but it's not great. Like, I don't get it, but who knows? I mean, Dragon Age Veilguard, I think, is just one of those games that will probably be studied, you know, over the next handful of years, because it is really, really fascinating, this disconnect. But because you're right, if you read a lot of the reviews, you would think that this game is going to do well, but the people they needed to buy it didn't buy it. So there was a disconnect between the reviewers, because if the reviewers were in in touch and were in tandem with the people that they needed to buy it. Good reviews would mean good sales. Just like if Vati, makes a review of a new Elden Ring game or a new From Software game, if he's positive on it, there's probably going to be a lot of other From Software fans that are going to love the game. In the same vein, if he hates it, they probably will also hate it. But the point is, he's in tune and is in congruity with the average consumer of that product. But with a lot of these game journalists that were covering these games, there was a disconnect, because I think what they needed for Dragon Age, they needed the Kingdom Come Deliverance fans. They needed the Baldur's Gate fans. They needed those people to buy the game. And they ended up pursuing a market that was not big enough. This modern audience, this modern market that if it exists, is just not big enough to justify games of this scale. I think that's a big issue. And I don't know how to really fix it from their perspective, other than they need, if these outlets want to be more in touch with the average gamer, I think they need to hire more typical gamers and stop talking down to them so much. But for me and my business, it's good, because it means that people are just going to come back to individual creators that they connect with more. If you're like, hey, I tend to agree a lot with Skill Up on games. What did he say about the game? Go watch him. Like, very few people are making purchasing decisions based on Eurogamer, based on IGN or whatever. They'll check it out for the memes, see kind of what the sentiment is very quickly, but they're not making their purchasing decisions based on those outlets. I think the influence might be like 5% of an individual's purchasing decision, whereas like Skill Up's review might be 30% or 40% of their purchasing decision. So, were you ever a game journalist or just a gamer like us? I've never worked as a games journalist. I'm just some guy sitting in a basement rambling about video games.
He took my thing.